Hello everyone, welcome back to Sports Gear. On this video, I'm going to predict the NBA season plus record predictions and standing predictions too. So let's get this video started and please don't forget to subscribe. This year's season will only have a 72 game schedule this year. So here are my Eastern Conference standing predictions. The Cleveland Cavaliers, 21-51. The Cleveland Cavaliers had a bad season last year, winning 19 games and losing 46 games, and finished dead last in the Eastern Conference. They have missed the playoffs in back-to-back seasons, and they had the second worst winning percentage in the league. Cleveland will most likely trade Kevin Love sometime this season, and that will let their young players develop this year. I think the Cleveland Cavaliers will most likely be one of the worst teams in the league this season and could be on the rise in 2022. The New York Knicks, 23-49. The New York Knicks haven't had a winning season since the 2012-2013 campaign. Since then, they have missed the playoffs every season since. Their head coach will have the New York Knicks play hard. However, there just isn't a lot of talent here. In the offseason, the New York Knicks didn't act like the Knicks that we have seen in the past. They didn't overspend for an average free agent, and instead, their main goal will be to let their young core develop this season and look towards the 2021 free agency. I absolutely think that the New York Knicks won't be a playoff contender this season, but could have a bright future ahead. The Charlotte Hornets, 25-47. The Charlotte Hornets had a bad season last year, having 23 wins and 42 losses. That was their worst winning percentage since the 2012-2013 season. They haven't made the playoffs since the 2015-2016 season. In the offseason, the Charlotte Hornets got Gordon Hayward in a trade with the Boston Celtics. The Charlotte Hornets franchise has made the playoffs just 3 times since the 2001-2002 season. So my prediction is that the Charlotte Hornets will be a little bit better team this season overall. The Detroit Pistons, 26-46. The Detroit Pistons had an absolute horrible season last year. That was their 6th worst season in franchise history. They haven't had a bad winning percentage like that since the 1993-1994 season, when they went 20-62 on that campaign. The Blake Griffin trade has turned out to be a terrible trade. Griffin has played in 75 games just once in the last 6 seasons. They would like to get rid of his contract, but for his durability, there are not likely many takers. By all means, I think the Detroit Pistons could be one of the worst teams in the NBA this year. The Chicago Bulls, 29-43. The Chicago Bulls are still in rebuilding mode after last season they went 22-43. They have missed the playoffs for the last 3 seasons in a row, and the last time they did make the playoffs was in the 2016-2017 season. The Bulls have some good players, but no one that can really carry a team. Their talent on paper could be good enough to make a run at the 8th seed. But however, all signs from the past show that the Chicago Bulls need 1 or 2 more seasons of true rebuilding time to turn this around. So I think the Chicago Bulls will be an improved team this season, but still will be rebuilding this season. The Orlando Magic, 32-40. The Orlando Magic have made the playoffs for 2 seasons in a row. Last season was good by making the playoffs, but they were an under 500 team. The Magic won 33 games last year, and they did nothing in the offseason to get better. There's not a lot of data to support you will win that many more games this season. I don't see the Orlando Magic taking a step forward this season, but I do see them taking a step back instead. I also don't see them making the playoffs this season either. By all means, I do think they will win 1 less game this season than last year. The Washington Wizards, 34-38. The Washington Wizards have had back-to-back losing seasons, and their last winning season came in the 2017-2018 campaign. In the offseason, the Wizards trade John Wall to the Houston Rockets for Russell Westbrook on December 2nd of 2020. Now, with Russell Westbrook in the midst, Washington has 2 all-star caliber players. While the rest of the lineup is scarce, the Wizards' dynamic duo alone could potentially lead them to the postseason. So I'm positive that the Washington Wizards could be a playoff team, but everything would have to go the right way this season. The Atlanta Hawks, 35-37. The Atlanta Hawks have been rebuilding for the last 3 seasons in a row, and the last time they did make the playoffs was back in the 2016-2017 season. Last season was the 5th worst season in franchise history by winning percentage. In the offseason, they improved more than any team. I believe that the Atlanta Hawks will be a more improved team this season and could have the potential to double their win total from last season. The Indiana Pacers, 38-34. The Indiana Pacers have made the playoffs for 5 consecutive seasons in a row. In those 5 playoff appearances, they hadn't got past the first round in any of those appearances. The last time they went deeper in the playoffs was back in the 2013-2014 season when they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. The Pacers had the 3rd best defensive team, 107.5 points allowed per game in the NBA last season. They have enough talent in their starting lineup to carry the Pacers to the playoffs. So I predict that the Indiana Pacers will be a good team again this season and most likely will make the playoffs for a 6th consecutive season in a row. The Toronto Raptors, 42-30. The Toronto Raptors had their best season in franchise history by winning percentage. In the playoffs, they made it to the Eastern Conference semifinals against the Boston Celtics and lost that series in 7 games. They have made the playoffs 7 straight seasons in a row. The Toronto Raptors allowed the least amount of points per game, 106.5 last season. So I'm positive that the Toronto Raptors will be a great team again this season. But they will rely on their defensive identity to lead them to a strong campaign this year. The Miami Heat, 44-28. The Miami Heat made the NBA Finals last season for the first time since LeBron James left the Miami Heat after the 2013-2014 season NBA Finals. Since LeBron James left them, they haven't made the playoffs in back-to-back seasons since then. Jimmy Butler proved that he can lead a team. While Butler was just under 20 points per game, he didn't need to go off for large quantities of points each night. He just had to score the points when it counted. I certainly think the Miami Heat are one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference this season and could make another appearance in the NBA Finals. The Boston Celtics, 45-27. The Boston Celtics had another great campaign last season. In the playoffs, they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals against the Miami Heat and lost that series in 6 games. It seems like every year the Boston Celtics are just one piece away from making the NBA Finals. They have made the playoffs 6 seasons in a row, and the last time they made the NBA Finals was back in the 2009-2010 season. The Boston Celtics had a rough offseason, losing Gordon Hayward to the Charlotte Hornets. That's a huge bench piece to lose. So my prediction is that the Boston Celtics will be a good team again this season and should be good enough to qualify as a middle-tier playoff team. The Brooklyn Nets, 47-25. The Brooklyn Nets made the playoffs last season for the 2nd consecutive season in a row and had a record under 500 last year. In the playoffs, they got swept against the Toronto Raptors in 4 games. Brooklyn will have a huge target on their back, with Durant and Kyrie Irving playing together for the first time. Durant hasn't played since the 2019 NBA Finals. If Durant is truly healthy, he is a top 3 player in the league. Irving was limited to just 20 games last season. I suspect that the Brooklyn Nets will be a contender for the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference this season and will have a deep playoff run. The Philadelphia 76ers, 48-24. The Philadelphia 76ers had another great season by making the playoffs for the 3rd consecutive season in a row. In the playoffs last season, they were eliminated in the first round against the Boston Celtics in 4 games. In the offseason, they got Seth Curry in a trade with the Dallas Mavericks on November 18th of 2020. On October 3rd of 2020, the Philadelphia 76ers announced that they had hired Doc Rivers as their Nets head coach for 5 years. By all means, I think the Philadelphia 76ers will be a great team again this season and will have a deep playoff run. The Milwaukee Bucks, 54-18. Milwaukee had another great season, but unfortunately it was disappointing at the same time. In the playoffs, they were unfortunately eliminated in the Eastern Conference semifinals against Miami Heat in 5 games. The biggest offseason move for Milwaukee was re-signing the Greek Freak on December 15th of 2020 to a 5-year, $228 million extension. So I absolutely think that Milwaukee will run away with the number 1 seed in the regular season and could be the best team in the NBA this year. Here are my Western Conference standing predictions. The Oklahoma City Thunder, 22-50. The Oklahoma City Thunder made the playoffs last season for the 5th consecutive season in a row. Last season, the Thunder shot the lead by qualifying as the number 5 seed after trading away Russell Westbrook to the Rockets. In the playoffs, they made it to the first round against the Houston Rockets and lost that series in 7 games. This season, the Thunder are in clear rebuilding mode by trading away their best players in the offseason. The Thunder have the potential to land a top 5 draft pick based on the lack of talent on their roster, which is exactly what their general manager wants. I'm positive that the Oklahoma City Thunder could be one of the worst teams in the NBA this season. The Minnesota Timberwolves, 27-45. The Minnesota Timberwolves had a bad season last year, being the second worst team in the Western Conference. Their record last season was 19 wins and 45 losses. They have only made the playoffs once in the last 16 seasons, and the last was back in the 2017-2018 campaign. So I think the Minnesota Timberwolves will have more wins than last season. But I still don't see them being a good team this year, and they will miss the playoffs for 3rd straight season in a row. The Sacramento Kings, 28-44. The Sacramento Kings didn't have a great season last year, winning 31 games and losing 41. They have missed the playoffs for 14 straight seasons, and the last time they did make the playoffs was back in the 2005-2006 season. That's the most non-playoff seasons in a row in franchise history. By all means, I think the Sacramento Kings won't be as good as last season. But I also think the Sacramento Kings look like a rebuilding team that doesn't want to say they're still rebuilding. The San Antonio Spurs, 30-42. The San Antonio Spurs had a horrible season last year. They missed the playoffs for the first time since the 1996-1997 season. In that period, they made the playoffs 22 straight seasons in a row and won 5 NBA titles. That's just pretty amazing to do that. The Spurs have one of the best NBA coaches of all time, named Greg Popovich. I suspect they will trade their best players at the trade deadline this season. By all means, I think the San Antonio Spurs won't be that good this season and will miss the playoffs for the 2nd consecutive season in a row. The Memphis Grizzlies, 33-39. The Memphis Grizzlies had a decent season last year, having 34 wins and 39 losses. They haven't made the playoffs since the 2016-2017 season. It looks like the Memphis Grizzlies could be near the end of the rebuilding mode. I suspect that the Memphis Grizzlies will be a more competitive team this season and will still be 1 year away from playoff contention. The New Orleans Pelicans, 36-36. The New Orleans Pelicans had a bad season last year, winning 30 games and losing 42. They have missed the playoffs for the last 2 seasons in a row. In their franchise history, they have made the playoffs 7 times out of their 18 seasons. In the offseason, they re-signed Brandon Ingram to a 5-year deal worth $158 million. I predict that the New Orleans Pelicans could be a contender for one of the last playoff spots. The Phoenix Suns, 37-35. The Phoenix Suns had their best season in wins since the 2014-2015 season. Last season, they had 34 wins and 39 losses. They have missed the playoffs for 10 straight seasons in a row, and that's the most in franchise history in a row. Their last postseason appearance came in the 2009-2010 campaign. In the offseason, the Phoenix Suns got Chris Paul in a trade with the Oklahoma City Thunder on November 16th of 2020. They saw what Chris Paul did for the Thunder last season. That was leading the team to a 44-28 record, number 5 seed in the playoffs, in a 7-game series with the Rockets. That's why the Suns were willing to bring Paul over to the team. Combined with Kevin Booker, who can be a contender for an MVP if he takes the next step in his game, I suspect that the Phoenix Suns will have a good chance of making a playoff spot this season, if everything goes right this year. The Golden State Warriors, 39-33. The Golden State Warriors had a horrible season last year and missed the playoffs for the first time since the 2011-2012 campaign. The reason why they weren't that good last season was because of major injuries to star players. They will welcome back Stephen Curry in the 2020-21 NBA season after he missed the majority of last season because of a hand injury. Draymond Green has also recovered from many injuries that had him in and out of the lineup last year. Unfortunately, Klay Thompson will miss the 2020-21 NBA season due to an Achilles tendon injury, which he suffered on November 18th. Even without Klay Thompson, the Warriors are good enough to make the playoffs. With Thompson out for a 2nd straight year with an injury, the Warriors' title hopes took a hit. So I think the Golden State Warriors will be a good team again this season and will be a playoff contender this season. The Dallas Mavericks, 42-30. The Dallas Mavericks had a fantastic season last year by making the playoffs for the first time since the 2015-2016 season. In the playoffs last season, they were eliminated in the first round against the Los Angeles Clippers in 6 games. While the Dallas Mavericks did not sign any big-name free agents, this offseason has been a big win. After having the most prolific offense in NBA history last season, there was a clear need on the defensive side after the team had one of the worst clutch time records in the league. They had a .321 close game winning percentage. Now, Dallas has not only recognized their biggest weakness from the previous season, but also now they have built a squad seemingly lacking any weakness. So I absolutely think that the Dallas Mavericks will have a great season this year and will have a deep playoff run. The Portland Trail Blazers, 44-28. The Portland Trail Blazers made the playoffs for a 7th consecutive season in a row. In the playoffs last season, they were eliminated in the first round against the Los Angeles Lakers in 5 games. The Portland Trail Blazers had a great offseason and appear to be ready to contend this year. But the team has too many variables to solidify themselves as a worthy playoff contender today. The most interesting variable is Carmelo Anthony. Can the 10-time NBA All-Star accept a role off the bench and be the 6th Man of the Year candidate? We already know what Lillard and CJ McCollum can do, but what about the supporting cast? If all the variables come together, they could be a serious contender. I absolutely think that the Portland Trail Blazers will be a lot better team this season than last year. It could make an NBA Finals appearance. The Houston Rockets, 45-27. The Houston Rockets had a great season last year, having 44 wins and 28 losses. They have made the playoffs for 8 straight seasons in a row, and their last non-playoff season came in the 2011-2012 campaign. In the playoffs, the Rockets made it to the conference semifinals against the Lakers and lost that in 5 games. In the offseason, the Rockets traded Russell Westbrook to the Washington Wizards for John Wall on December 2nd of 2020. This trade has some real value to this trade in favor of the Rockets. During the 2014-2015 season, the combination of Wall and Bradley Beal led the Wizards to a 46-36 record and a second-round playoff berth against the Atlanta Hawks. The Wizards nearly took down the Hawks and made the conference finals, but lost in 6 games. This year's Rockets team looks very similar in makeup to that Wizards team. I'm certain that the Houston Rockets will be a great team again this season, and if all the pieces live up to their potential, not only are the Rockets going to make the playoffs, but they could have a deep postseason run. The Utah Jazz, 46-26. The Utah Jazz had another great season last year, going to the playoffs for the 4th consecutive season in a row. Their record last season was 44 wins and 28 losses. In the playoffs, the Jazz got eliminated in the first round against the Denver Nuggets in 7 games. In that series against the Nuggets, the Jazz had a 3-1 game lead in that series, and then the Nuggets won the final 3 games. I suspect that the Utah Jazz will be even better this season. It could have a deep playoff run this season. It could maybe make an NBA Finals appearance. The Denver Nuggets, 47-25. The Denver Nuggets had a fantastic season last year, having 46 wins and 27 losses on the campaign. In the playoffs, they made it to the Western Conference Finals for the first time since the 2008-2009 season. Unfortunately, the Denver Nuggets lost against the Los Angeles Lakers in 5 games. In those playoff series, they trailed against the Utah Jazz 3-1 and came back to win that series in 7 games. In the second playoff series, they trailed against the Los Angeles Clippers 3-1 and also came back to win that series in 7 games. So I predict that the Denver Nuggets will be one of the best teams in the Western Conference this season and could make an NBA Finals appearance. The Los Angeles Clippers, 49-33. The Los Angeles Clippers couldn't have been more disappointing than they were a year ago. In the regular season, they had a record of 49 wins and 23 losses. In the playoffs, they made it to the Western Conference semifinals against the Denver Nuggets, and unfortunately, they lost in 7 games. They were up 3-1 over Denver and then lost the final 3 games against the Denver Nuggets. The Clippers basically rolled over in that series against the Nuggets and looked like they wanted to go home. On September 28th of 2020, Doc Rivers stepped down following the Clippers' defeat to the Denver Nuggets in the conference semifinals. On October 20th of 2020, the Clippers hired Tyronn Lue as their Nets head coach. The Clippers have the potential of 2 of the top 10 players in the NBA. Now that Leonard and George have had time to build their chemistry, we should expect the Clippers to be even better this season. I suspect that the Los Angeles Clippers are going to be title contenders this season and will be one of the best teams in the NBA this season. The Los Angeles Lakers, 50-22. The Los Angeles Lakers achieved their ultimate goal for last season, winning the NBA Finals and their 17th NBA title in franchise history, and LeBron James' 4th in his career. In the NBA Finals, they played against the Miami Heat and won that series in 6 games. In the offseason, the Lakers re-signed LeBron James to a 2-year contract extension, while Anthony Davis agreed to a new 5-year max contract. That will keep the Lakers' 2 best players in purple and gold until at least 2022-2023. I absolutely think that the Los Angeles Lakers will have a great shot at repeating as NBA champions again this season. So those are my record predictions for this year's NBA season and standing predictions too. What are your guys' predictions for this year's NBA season? Who do you think will have the best record this season? Join me in the comment section below and tell me what you guys think, and please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Nathan. Don't forget to just keep loving sports, and I'll see you next time.